talking with a parapsychologist, paranormal investigator, author, Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe from the UK show Most Haunted. Check it out right now after our intro. And as always, time to bring on my lovely co-host, Liz Jumper. How you doing, Liz?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Sean?
I'm doing great. We got some nice weather for a change. It's nice and cool. Got the windows open.
Yeah. Got my sweater on. I like to be cozy.
That's awesome. We still need rain, but at least it's cooler around here. That's a good thing. Also, without further ado, this show is a super chat, so please give us a like and a share on Facebook, or a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of future broadcasts on YouTube, and share. Thank you. I am also looking for people to book for the future. For those of you that are watching live and also on demand, go ahead and please type in comments anyone you would like us to try to book for the future. Most of the big names I have obviously tried. Unfortunately, usually they either don't see it, or if I'm lucky, they see it and they completely ignore me. But at least I try to reach out to them. That's all you can do.
Well, I think you have a pretty big name on today.
We certainly do. We have a great name on. All right, so we're going to move right along. Also, again, for anyone watching in the future on demand, please feel free to put someone's name in comments, and I will be checking that. All right. Also, if you have any questions on the way, please put them in all capital letters. Help make it easier for us to see them. All right. And now for the real introduction for tonight. He is an English psychologist specializing in parapsychology and forensic psychology. Ciarán attended John Hampden Grammar School, in Wycombe, Buckinghamshire. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. And had a brief spell at High Wycombe Music Center. He is currently employed at Bucks New University. He has held a research associate position at the University of Toulouse.
Toulouse.
Le Morel. I'm sorry. I've definitely
You're butchering the French. It's good. You're good.
Yeah, sorry. I never took a day of French in school. And also an online tutorial position at Derby University. Yes, Derby. I know that pronunciation. Previously employed at Liverpool Hope University, lecturing in psychology with a parapsychology component. O'Keeffe is a member of the Society for Psychical Research and an advisor to the Ghost Club. According to his own website, he completed his PhD at the University of Hertfordshire under the supervision of Richard Wiseman and Julia Buckroyd. O'Keeffe became known in the United Kingdom following his appearances on Living TV's paranormal television series Most Haunted and Jane Goldman Investigates, where he performs the role of parapsychologist and paranormal investigator. He's also featured in National Geographic Channel's 2005 series Paranormal. O'Keeffe is an open-minded skeptic on most paranormal phenomena. He also attended Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland, where he double majored in music and psychology. He then completed what should be master's, correct me if I'm wrong, in investigative psychology at the University of Liverpool. Before studying for his PhD at the University of Hertfordshire, he is currently the academic head of department and senior lecturer for psychology at Buckinghamshire New University. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest is the great Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe.
Hello, good evening.
Welcome.
How are you doing?
All right, lovely to see you both. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Despite pronunciation issues, it was a lovely introduction.
Hey, thank you. We try at Paranormal Files.
Absolutely, and I'll forgive you for the pronunciation of Université de Toulouse, the French.
Oh, I majorly butchered that one up.
And then the town is High Wycombe. High Wycombe. That's the town. All the English
High
listeners
Wycombe.
will be going, oh, High Wycombe. But yes, thank you so much. A lovely introduction. Lovely to see you both.
Yeah, you
Well,
can
you
tell.
too.
You can tell we're
Thank
from the
you.
States. All right. Go ahead.
So what got you started with the paranormal?
Oh, wow.
What got you interested in this whole line of?
Wow. Well, I've always been fascinated by ghost stories, even as a young boy. So even at a very young age, I was reading James Herbert, Clive Barker, Stephen King, contemporary novelists, but also even older ones, H.P. Lovecraft, M.R. James, and just always fascinated by ghost stories, even to the point where my parents were particularly concerned about my reading habits as a young boy. And so that has always been there, and I'm not sure why, but actually, in terms of why did that then translate into parapsychology and kind of interest in ghosts, as a teenager, the movie Ghostbusters. It was simply that. That was the turning point. I saw that in my teenage years. I was about 13 years old, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I just love the idea of running around hunting ghosts and having a proton pack and a cool car. And here I am without neither. I don't have any of it at all. But I'm living the dream. I have a career in parapsychology and ghost hunting. So I owe it all to that moment in 1984 when Ghostbusters came out.
And of all places, in Gettysburg, I saw people get out of a makeshift Ghostbusters car in the costume.
Wow.
It was awesome.
Wow. That is awesome. And Gettysburg too, as well. Fantastic place. Fantastic place.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Ghostbusters, I will always be a fan of Ghostbusters. Yeah, definitely. David says, ooh. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so can you explain to us exactly what parapsychology is?
Yeah,
just for some newbies that
so very broadly, we would say that parapsychology is the scientific study of the paranormal. That's very broadly, but I think the issue is the word paranormal can mean so many different things. It's everything from ghosts and telepathy to Yeti, aliens, UFOs, and actually parapsychology doesn't cover all of that. Parapsychology is interested in a very, very small kind of focused part of the paranormal, which is ESP or extrasensory perception, PK or psychokinesis, and then also instances of survival after death, which are hauntings, poltergeist, but also mediumship. And so that's parapsychology in terms of our focus. And within the world today, there are probably around 250, 300 qualified parapsychologists in the world, which is very few if you compare it to psychology, biology, the mainstream sciences. It's not very many. And the majority of those will be looking at ESP. There's only about 10% of parapsychologists will have any interest in ghosts and looking at ghosts, and that's my area of expertise is ghosts and haunting phenomena and poltergeist activity, and really trying to get to understand exactly what's going on and using science as well to try and understand. So that's parapsychology in a nutshell, the scientific study of the paranormal with a particular focus on ESP, PK, and kind of haunting stuff.
Good. Well, thank you for explaining that. I know sometimes we get newbies that are, we don't really know how to explain it sometimes either when
Absolutely.
I get asked that question.
Also, it's not even just in the newbies. If you were to just focus on the media, they would believe that parapsychologists are the scientific guys who run around ghost hunting.
Right.
There is kind of a misperception out there, but the majority of parapsychologists you'll find in a lab, in a university somewhere in the world doing experimental studies. You won't find them getting involved in actually visiting haunted houses and speaking to people about their ghostly experiences. It just doesn't happen. It's very, very rare. But I think because I had a boyhood fascination, as a teenager with ghosts, that as a parapsychologist, I've wanted to continue that. So I'll do experimental work in the lab at Buxton University, but I'll also, on a weekend, I'll be out ghost hunting.
That's awesome. And like you said, it's a shame that more of them are not out ghost hunting, because that's where I would think, like, I know you said in a prior interview, but you're not. That's something you have to do beyond the lab. The lab's going to restrict you, I think, in that regards, make it harder to. I lost track a little bit, but to properly look for evidence or
I guess
research.
But the way to look at it, Sean, is to say that parapsychologists in the main are scientists, and what they're trying to do is control the environment, hence lab work and experimental work. That's what they're trying to do. Well, as soon as you get out into the field, into haunted houses and haunted locations, you're no longer in control of what's going on. It just happens spontaneously. It just happens without any prediction of what's going to what's going to happen in terms of people's experiences. And so that's why parapsychologists in the main will avoid working out in the field and looking at haunted houses. However, if you were to ply any parapsychologist with a few beers, I'm sure they would tell you that most of them got into this because of boyhood fascination with ghosts, to be honest.
Right.
And there's only a few of us that have actually transferred that boyhood fascination into continued testing and interest of it. But a lot of parapsychologists, and I speak from experience chatting to a lot of them, they got into it because they were fascinated by the idea of ghosts.
So what kind of things do you do in a lab when you're trying to test these theories out?
Some of my research is looking at what we call fear correlates. That's my most recent research. I mean, there's loads of stuff going back over the years, which I've published on various in various academic journals and presented at conferences, about testing mediums, testing psychics in the lab, and how do you do that? Seeing if they're accurate or not. I've been involved in studies testing psychic detectives, for example, psychics that are involved in criminal investigations. So fascinated by that idea. So those are all examples of tests that I've done in the past where you're setting up a controlled laboratory experiment. With haunting stuff, it's a bit more difficult. What I'm trying to do is look at the natural explanations for why people have ghostly experiences. And one of those is around fear. The fact that when you get fearful, when you get scared, it can just play havoc with your mind. It really can, and if you're in a dark, haunted environment, there are very few of us that won't get a little bit scared, that anticipation of what's coming, but that can affect our perception. It can affect what we can see. It can affect what we can hear, all of those things. In a lab, I'll be testing that. And so an example of some recent work I've been doing is I have a virtual reality haunted location, basically an old prison, as it happens, which is a long dark corridor. And I send people through that corridor in the virtual reality environment, and I'm measuring their fear response the entire time. But what I'm looking at is, how does it affect their perception? So they do perceptual tests afterwards, but also, what is it about the environment that causes the most fear? So because it's virtual reality, I'm able to adjust the length of the corridor, how dilapidated and how run down it is, the lighting, how many doors there are, even simple things like how high does the ceiling need to be, that sort of stuff. So things like that, and that just gives you an idea of some of the experiments that I've done, but there are absolutely loads. And I tend to try and publish my stuff so that the public can have access to it. Otherwise it'd just be lost in a scientific academic journal gathering dust somewhere. But if people can access it electronically, then they can read about some of this stuff.
Is that related to the battersea? podcast, or
Say that again.
is that related? I might be mispronouncing it, but is that related to your
Oh yeah,
podcast, the Battersea?
yeah. The Battersea Poltergeist
I'm
was
sorry.
the Battersea Poltergeist was a podcast that Danny Robbins, a collaborator, long-term collaborator, set up here in the UK. If you're international based, so in North America, you can access it through BBC Sounds or BBC Radio 4 still. And it's a famous case that happened back in 1956 in Battersea area of London. And in that, one of the things that Danny was asking me, there you go, perfect. Danny was asking me was, what did I think was going on in that particular case? And there was no doubt in my mind that the family and the focus of the activity with Shirley were absolutely petrified at the phenomena that they were presented with. They were just really scared, and that was genuinely playing havoc with their perception, how they saw things, how they felt things, how they heard things. And you add to that fear the fact that because phenomena was happening at night as well, it was meant they had disrupted sleep. And so they were literally going weeks and weeks and weeks without any good sleep and being scared. And so as part of this show, and you can actually see it on that page that you've got highlighted there, I put Danny through one of my experiments, which was to actually put him through that virtual reality house. We used an alternative house just to make it more scary for him. But yeah, you can see the sort of study, how to create a haunting video there, and effectively sent Danny through that haunted house at the university and saw how it played havoc with his perception. I then took him from that environment into just a room that we've got made up to look like a front room in a house, just a lounge. And it was kind of, it was perfect house, perfect room that looked very like the house that was featured in Battersea Poltergeist. And so after he'd been through the scary environment, just sat him in that room and said, just sit here for 10-15 minutes. That's it. Just sit here for 10-15, reflect on the experience you've had. Came back 10-15 minutes later, and he said, yeah, I said, how was that time? And he said, yeah, it was absolutely fine, but I know at some point you switched infrasound or something on, and that there was somebody walking past the window there because I saw through the blind. And he reported various things. And I said, but Danny, I didn't do anything. I didn't switch anything on. If somebody's walking past that window, I'd be surprised because we're 4 floors up. How is that possible? And that's what I mean. Things started to happen to him just because he was in this heightened state. So yeah, it's a lovely example of one of the studies that I've been doing and still continue to do.
I followed your lead and checked it. I really enjoyed that video. That was an excellent video.
Yeah, must have you in the lab sometime, Sean.
I would love to. That would be awesome.
It would be really awesome.
Yes. I'd volunteer for certain in a heartbeat. I got to get to England somehow, but unfortunately, that's not likely to happen anytime soon. The idea is... All right. There we go. We're back. Is there a way you look at evidence differently? Because as a parapsychologist, or possible evidence differently?
It's an interesting question. And I guess part of it comes from knowledge. And I don't think parapsychologists should necessarily be separated from ghost hunters, from, the stuff that you do or any of your listeners do that, go out ghost hunting. The reason why is because we are all, to an extent, aware of some of the natural explanations for what's going on. Some of the alternative explanations for some of the ghostly experiences. We're all aware of that. The difference is, I think, with parapsychologists is that we're aware of everything. So if somebody has one particular experience, say the hairs go up on the back of their neck and they report, oh, there's somebody in this room with me. As a parapsychologist, I could give you 30, even 40 possible explanations for that are not paranormal.
Mhm.
And so that would be the only difference in terms of how a parapsychologist might review the evidence, in a ghost investigation, is by being familiar with all of the natural explanations. For myself personally, though, remembering that I've kind of got two hats, parapsychologist hat and a ghost buster or ghost hunter hat,
Mhm.
it would be a case of, if evidence is presented, what you're doing is almost got a checklist of all of the natural explanations, and effectively you're trying to tick them off or cross them
Mhm.
out and say, well, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And at the end of that list of natural explanations is a supernatural one. So effectively you've discounted all the rest and you're left with, there you go, it must be a supernatural explanation. So that would be kind of effectively how you might review and how you might approach evidence as a parapsychologist.
Okay.
How often are you not able to find an easy alternative?
That's an interesting question as well, because in investigations that I might be involved in, it happens very, very, very rarely. In investigations where evidence is presented to me, it could happen a lot, but
Mhm.
only to the sense, in the sense that if people present evidence to me, so say for example somebody says, I was in an investigation and a glass that we had on the table moved and fell off the table, all I could do is offer potential natural explanations. But say for example one of them is, well, how do you know somebody didn't knock the table and the glass came off? But the response might be, well, nobody was standing near the table. Okay, so we can discount that. How do you know that there wasn't a huge truck that went by outside, caused vibration, caused the table to move, and that knocked the glass over? Well, we know that because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, there was no traffic outside. So all I'd be doing is offering alternative explanations.
Okay.
If after all of that conversation, the person was convincing me and saying, look, anything you've offered, we can discount, I would just hold up my hands and go, well, the only possible explanation is you're lying or it's paranormal.
Mhm.
And it's those sorts of situations and that sort of evidence that really keep me interested in ghost hunting and the paranormal generally. Cases like the Battersea poltergeist, where the whole family independently reported a pair of slippers, so kind of bed shoes, slippers, walking of their own accord across the floor.
Mhm.
Now, 5 members of the family saw it and they reported it to the investigator. That's not just a shoe falling or hearing something and looking around and not knowing what it is. That is 2 tangible objects, slippers, walking out of the room. I can't explain, unless they're all lying. I can't
Mhm.
explain that. That's not vibration. That's not EMF.
Right.
That's not anything like that. So there have been a number of cases where I've been presented with evidence where you just have to hold up your hand and go, if I take what the person said is true, I have no explanation. In investigations I've done myself, there's only really been a couple of incidents where I thought these are head scratching moments. The only possible explanation here is paranormal. And bear in mind, I've been involved in now thousands of investigations, as part of TV shows, but also private investigations with groups, etc. But there's only, I would say only a couple that are head scratching moments. And I know you're going to ask me what they are, right?
Yes, we are.
Certainly. Those are the really good ones.
One of them was an investigation of now it's a closed down nightclub in the northwest of England. People that know it's Birkenhead across the river from Liverpool, and the staff in the nightclub, just before it had been closed down, they had conducted a séance, and they had reported after the séance happened, things started to happen to them, and just the atmosphere changed. In the club, they could see things out of the corner of their eye. The fire exit doors opened of their own accord. They couldn't explain various things. A group got involved and started to investigate, a group called Parascience, and they invited me in because I was based in Liverpool at the time, and we did an investigation over the course of about 6 months. Once a week, we'd visit the location and gather data. One particular evening, it just so happened that all of the staff that were there in that original seance were there at the nightclub at the same time, even though it was all abandoned now. A couple of them were walking by, a couple of them had visited. Randomly, they were all there. And one of the investigators said, you know what? Amazing opportunity. Why don't you recreate that seance? Just so we can see where you're all seated. We can get a sense of what happened. Only if you want to, though. There's no need to do it if you don't want to do it. They were all really up for it. We're looking forward to doing that seance. Again, knowing that they would never visit the club again. It was completely closed and abandoned. They sat doing the seance. I was filming at the time with a thermal imager. And not filming for a TV show, but recording onto a thermal imager. And I always set it to black and white, so that if there's a change in temperature, it shows up green, so you can instantly see the drop in temperature when you're filming. So everything's black and white. After about 20 minutes or so, the people around the seance table said, it doesn't feel like anything happening. There isn't the same atmosphere that we've had before. Let's just stop. And I said, well, it's a unique opportunity. Just carry on. Just give it another 5-10 minutes or so and we'll see what happens. What I didn't tell them was that out of the corner of the screen on my thermal imager, I could see what I can only describe as a green fog approaching the seance table along the floor, almost like this mass of cold energy or cold temperature, whatever you want to call it, was approaching the seance table. At that point, it kind of wrapped itself around the seance table and just hung there. Really, really bizarre. But it coincided with the people around the table going, it feels like the atmosphere's changed now. You could almost see them shiver as this kind of cold mass was there. And for about 30 minutes, they were in contact with spirit. They felt they were moving a glass on the table and all of that, and skeptical about that, but they felt that there was something there. And then one of them said, you know what, it feels like the atmosphere is changing. We're losing contact with the spirit. But they said it as this cold mass just went.
Wow.
Just disappeared. So it's a lovely moment where you've got equipment getting an objective measure of something, and people then interpreting the experience, so also having the experience. To this day, it's a head-scratching moment, and what can we say? Potentially, it's something paranormal.
That's awesome. We have our first question. One moment here. All right, comes from David Stevenson. Have you ever investigated an active poltergeist case?
I have, yes. For those that ghost hunt regularly, you'll know, but the poltergeist cases are incredibly rare. Even though we talk about cases like Enfield poltergeist, mentioned Battersea, there's loads of others. Actually, they come along almost feels like once in a lifetime. I investigated 2. One of them didn't go any further than interviews. And that was partly because I like to be very upfront with my interviews about my approach. And sometimes when people are asking you for help, they may be asking you for different sort of things that you could offer. So in this particular poltergeist case, which was an amazing case, it was a family that felt that they were plagued by a poltergeist, and that there were objects moving, and there were loud crashes and bangs at night, and just various phenomena that they were experiencing. When I spoke to them and interviewed them, they were more interested in knowing what spirit was causing the activity. And I had to be upfront and honest and say the conclusion that I come to on this particular case might be that there's something paranormal going on, but it might also be that there's something normal. But I'm the wrong person to get involved if you would like me to name the spirit, because that's effectively what they were asking for. So I politely stepped away and destroyed all the evidence, and it was absolutely fine. So that was one example. The other example is a poltergeist case in a pub. In a lovely old English pub where the owners were actually getting really annoyed at the fact that a resident poltergeist was destroying their stock, destroying the beer, destroying their glasses. The clientele at this pub were getting frustrated at the number of glasses that were being destroyed, and I was fortunate enough to investigate it. It was pitched as more exaggerated than the reality. When I turned up at the location, yes, we were able to capture a couple of glasses moving, but certainly I went in with the impression that everything was kicking off. There were glasses falling all over the place. There were bottles of beer. The taps were running, when in fact it was more one or two bits of phenomena on a daily basis, which is still amazing. Don't get me wrong, still amazing. But yeah, went in with, thought I'll approach this scientifically, see what the issue is. One of the main phenomena that they focused on was that all the staff felt the focus of activity was down in the cellar, where the big beer barrels, you go down there to change them, and anytime anybody went down there, they felt sick. They felt very oppressive, real negative feeling, oppressive kind of dizzy and negative feeling in their head, that sort of thing, and people kind of looking as though something's behind them or shadows around them. And that part of the case was easy to resolve. It was actually a wiring issue more than anything else. If you if you look at your household appliances, there'll probably be, if you measure them with an appropriate electromagnetic field meter, going to be anything from 10, 15, 20, 25 hertz, that sort of thing, maximum 5, 10, 15 hertz. Down in the cellar, they were in the hundreds, 600, 700 hertz. It was just, way in excess of what it should have been, and quite dangerous actually for the staff. So as soon as you did that and removed the wiring element and had it all corrected, it changed the atmosphere for the staff down in the cellar. And it removed some of the reports of objects moving around. It was almost as though some of the glasses were falling accidentally, and they're attributing that to the focus of the activity down in the cellar. So that's one example. But I dream of the day when I can walk into an Enfield poltergeist case or a Battersea poltergeist case where everything is genuinely kicking off. That would be absolutely amazing.
Usually when people say everything in the world happens, almost nothing happens on an investigation from what we have found, or at least I have found.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And actually that's why, there's quite an interesting technique that you can use with private investigations that we learnt from people like Charles Oniton and some well-known parapsychologists in the 80s, which is to use the diary method. If somebody calls and says that they've got things happening, you would encourage them from that day to keep a diary. But the key thing is not to say, I want you to keep a diary because I want to know about all the stuff that's happening. No, the key is to say, I want you to keep a diary from this point forward, and we'll get back in touch in a few weeks' time and maybe arrange to visit and learn more. But I want you to keep a diary. I'm as interested in those moments where nothing happens as I am when something happens. And with that instruction, you're effectively getting them to report everything, but you're also getting them to take the focus away from the things that happen. Because too often in these private cases, you're right, Sean, when people say, that everything's kicking off, the world's falling apart, it might only be one or two things a day.
Right.
But if you're only focused on that, then you just ignore all of the times when nothing happens. And if you encourage them to sit down and write a diary, that can even be quite therapeutic and kind of help with the psychology of what's going on, even if there's genuine phenomena, but it can kind of help them get a little bit of control over the situation as well. So that's a technique that we sometimes like to use.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I never thought of, and another good use for the diary thing. That's a tremendous idea. Also, one second here. A reminder to everyone, our guest is parapsychologist, paranormal investigator, author, Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe, Please put any questions on capital letter to help us see them. If you like the broadcast, consider helping us out by liking and sharing. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching on Facebook, or by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing on YouTube. We also have 2 more questions here. We'll go the first one here. Thank you, Gary. If a ghost does not have bodily function, including the brain, then how do they walk amongst us?
Gary, that is a brilliant question, and a brilliant question that has plagued parapsychologists, psychical researchers, ghost hunters, philosophers for centuries, for absolute centuries. This idea, and you can go back, for example, 300-400 years, and it comes down to, how do you perceive ghosts? Is it about when we survive after death, our soul survives and our soul carries everything? So effectively, if our soul survives, it's the soul representation, SOUL representation of who we were, that walks among us. A very religious concept that a lot of philosophers, talk about. But also, you're tapping into the idea that there might be lots of theories for what ghosts actually are. There's no doubt people are having ghostly experiences and people are seeing ghosts. There's no doubt about that. Across the world, hundreds, if not thousands, of people are having these experiences from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all education, all jobs, you name it. They're having these experiences. But what is going on? When you start to look at paranormal explanations, they are as many as the normal explanations. So to give you an example, Gary, there's an argument to say that when we see a ghost walking amongst us, we're not actually seeing a ghost. That it's almost as though it's a telepathic impression that has been put there by somebody in the afterlife, and we think we're seeing them walk amongst us, when actually it's the imagery playing in our head that they're putting it there. Now that is amazing. If that is the case, that is amazing, don't get me wrong. But that's very different from saying somebody in the afterlife is coming back to this life and walking around us. Another theory is the whole idea of, multiverse and parallel dimensions, the idea that actually we're catching glimpses of different times because of the way dimensions work. When you start to talk about paranormal explanations, they are vast, and there are so many of them, and all of them equally fascinating. So as soon as you ask that question, Gary, and a related question is, why aren't ghosts naked? It's a similar sort of question. But as soon as you ask these questions, you really get into an interesting discussion about, wow, why isn't that the case? And then you can start to think about theories and that sort of things. Yes, it was the ghost of hell. Exactly. Why aren't, as soon as you start to say that, then you get into the whole, demon side of things, and, are ghosts innocent, or are we actually seeing demonic representation? And again, it's a religious perspective, and there'll be some religions that will say exactly that, so it's down to your beliefs, down to your thoughts. But yes, look at all of the writings for hundreds of years trying to answer this exact question.
All right, thank you. We also have another question. One moment here from Matt. Do you recall a specific moment in your career that tested your skepticism the most?
That's really good, because I don't actually know what you're asking. I don't know if you're asking whether my skepticism was tested because I thought it was something paranormal, or my skepticism was tested because there was just so much going on and it was difficult to remain a skeptic. I'll answer both very quickly. One example is there was an investigation I did as part of one of the shows, Most Haunted, which was Pendle Hill, which was Halloween back in 2007, I think it was. And for whatever reason, in that atmosphere, members of the crew, including the medium and the cameraman and various investigators, just started dropping like flies, collapsing, fainting, to the point where we started off with about 10 people in Pendle Hill Farm at the beginning of the investigation. an hour and a half into the investigation, and it was just 3 of us left. The others had just collapsed and were taken out. Now that tested my skepticism, not because I thought something was paranormal was going on, but because I was seeing in front of me, psychological phenomena at its extreme. The fact that people were genuinely fainting and falling and collapsing, that tested my skepticism in that respect. I guess another point where my skepticism was tested because there was something paranormal going on, but something very close to home, was when I witnessed my wife being scared because of a paranormal occurrence. We did an investigation of an underground Second World War German bunker on the island of Guernsey, and it was just the 2 of us. We were recceing the place for a series I did called Ghostlands, and it was just my wife Anna and myself. She wouldn't go into the place. She hated it, absolutely hated it. But she was able to be on the outside within kind of the locked fence and the door. So we had locked ourselves in. It was just the 2 of us. I went off into the dark myself, this whole labyrinth of corridors in this underground bunker where it literally, you'd have a squadron down there. So I was off walking around, and I was taking a camera just so that I could keep a record of what I was seeing. And at some point I heard my wife call out my name, and I could hear she was distressed, and I ran back to where she was, and it took easily a few minutes to run back. It was such a vast place. When I got back, she was just as white as anything. She had been sitting just outside of this bunker, and she had heard footsteps round the corner approaching her. She thought it was me coming back, after my little recce, and she said, Ciarán. And as soon as she said my name, the footsteps stopped. She then said, Ciarán, and she got up. As she got up and said my name a 3rd time, she heard the footsteps, that almost like the person turning in the dust, and the footsteps go the other way. She then shouted for me, and that's the point where I ran back to find her standing there as white as anything. So effectively somebody had approached her. Bearing in mind, these are secure military bunkers. There is no way you could get in once they're locked down. Absolutely no way. And that was a point that tested my skepticism, because it's something that we all, I hope, strive for as ghost hunters, is not just the experience you have, but you like to have individuals around you that you trust implicitly, so that when they report an experience, that they're having a genuine experience. And here I was with my wife, who of course I trust implicitly, and she was reporting this experience, and because of everything I've said, I know that I could not explain it in any other way. So yeah, that was a real moment that tested my skepticism. So yeah, good question, Matt.
All right, we have one more. Also, Gary had a little bit of an elaboration there on his. He walked into something freezing cold as hell.
Wow, as you do. Interesting, Gary. Really interesting. When we hear about an experience like that, we'd be starting to ask under what conditions it happened. You're hunting, you're outside, those sorts of things. And if somebody asked me, presented me that sort of experience as evidence, I would say, well, do you want me to start having a conversation trying to explain it? Because then I'd be asking questions about this. Was it outside? What sort of day was it? What state were you in? Had you had lots of caffeine? Because also that can have an effect on your bodily temperature. How much sleep had you had that day? It's just various things. I almost sound like the Ghostbusters when they're in the library asking the librarian all of those questions. But that's exactly the case. You'd be asking all of these questions. The interesting thing is that there's nothing I could ask that could take away from that experience that Gary had. And that's the lovely thing about ghostly experiences, that the best evidence is your own evidence, is your own experience. So even though I go into this sort of stuff as a parapsychologist assessing the evidence, at the end of the day, it's your own experience, and there's nothing I can take away from that. So yeah, loads happening for Gary, which is fascinating.
Yeah, in the middle of the night, I said something, mind speak to him about his real name.
Boyfriend's maybe real name, yeah.
Yeah.
So mind speak is it's a lovely turn of phrase that potentially could imply telepathy. Something he's getting some sort of name. So a whole series of events there or experiences that are fascinating. Like I said, subjective experience. They're very personal. You can't take those away from people once they've had them.
Yeah, and one more little thing. Matt says thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. 1 second here.
So what are some of your favorite places that you have investigated, and what did you find there?
Wow, that's a really good question. But I know you guys have investigated Moundsville, West Virginia State Penitentiary. It's one of my favorite locations, to be honest. Just a vast prison. And I remember being there with the Most Haunted team, and we were in the area where they have the solitary confinement cells, and because they need to be shut from, I guess it's the guards area, which is in a different area, kind of overlooking that part of the prison. You can't shut them from where you're standing, and we could account for everybody in the team, and yeah, the cell doors just kind of shut. They just moved along and shut, and it was just a fascinating moment for me, because anytime anything happens when I'm with a team, especially if it's a television show, I'm always clocking, where are people, where are the team, because if I can't count for everybody, then I'll always be thinking about a skeptical perspective. But if they're there in front of me, then it presents something a little bit more interesting. So yeah, Moundsville State Penitentiary. And you've got some amazing locations in America. Eastern State, in Philadelphia is another amazing location. Queen Mary as well. I was lucky enough to investigate. In Europe, I would say that one of my favorite locations is Hampton Court Palace, which is the old palace of Henry VIII. King Henry VIII. Oh, just amazing, vast location. And the lovely thing about that is that there are experiences that people have had there going back hundreds and hundreds of years, to the extent where it's almost like a visitor's book. When people have stayed at that palace and think about the hundreds of people that would have stayed there and the various people that would have stayed there, hundreds of people, they have kept, the curator at the palace has kept kind of the files of when people have written letters back to the palace and gone, this is what happened to me last night, or when people have filled out a visitor's book, or when they've reported to one of the guards, this is what happened, and then the guard kept a log. But it's consistently in the same areas of the palace over 300-400 years, which is just, it's almost like the holy grail of a haunted location, to have that history and to have that consistency and that written evidence of locations. And I was fortunate enough about 20 years ago, in 2000, 22 years ago, to stay in Hampton Court Palace for 2 weeks and investigate. It's a tough life, staying in a palace.
I'm sure.
I managed.
Sounds that way.
So yeah, stayed in Hampton Court Palace and for 2 weeks had run of the place with a team from University of Hertfordshire, and we had a fantastic time. And again, sending members of the public through the palace and people having the same experiences in the same places that a random member of the public had 300 or 400 years ago. And that for me was just absolutely phenomenal. Amazing place.
That is something. All right. Also, one more thing here. Going back to Gary, he also had an ordeal with that he solved on his own. I think
Brilliant.
Bigfoot.
That's good. Good.
All right. We also have a question again from David. Do parapsychologists ever work with or alongside physicists to share theories about the paranormal?
Yeah, really good question, and also taps into an interesting point about parapsychology. The vast majority of parapsychologists come from a psychology background, so they have qualifications in psychology, and that's led them into parapsychology. But it's not always the case. And actually, you find some parapsychologists with a background in history or in linguistics or anthropology, but actually, there are a number of parapsychologists with a background in physics. And even one of the team that I was with in Hampton Court Palace, Paul Stevenson. Oh, Paul Stevenson. There you go. Coincidence. David Stevenson asking the question, and I answer it with potentially a relative, Paul Stevenson. He was a physicist who was also a parapsychologist based at Edinburgh University. And exactly that, David, that there's some interesting theories from the last few decades, but also developing theories in physics, which parapsychologists are very interested in, especially when it comes to experiments around teleportation at an atomic level, but also theories about quantum entanglement, about dimensions, various aspects like that. You can start to see parallels in terms of the way parapsychologists might think about some of the phenomena that physicists also, deal with. But also parapsychologists might work with physicists to try and discuss the rules of science. There's always this idea that if ghosts genuinely exist, we need to change the laws of science. And that's the interesting thing chatting to physicists, that there are various aspects of the quantum area that can start to have that flexibility to allow for something like ghosts. But equally, there will be physicists who will work with who have no belief in the paranormal, who will be equally interesting to work with because they have a very scientific, natural, explanation-minded approach to things. So yeah, we're always open to it, and it happens a lot in terms of working with physicists. So yeah, good question, David. Thank you.
All right, awesome.
What do you think about ghost boxes? I know Sean really wants us to ask this question.
Oh, yes.
I think he wants to share something with you.
This is one big answer I was waiting for.
Yes. Let me start with a positive. I love ghost boxes.
Okay.
That's the positive. Even to the point where the first time that I really used a ghost box, interestingly, was in Gettysburg. And I was quite lucky in that a colleague of mine, April Slaughter, who's based in Texas, she had got hold of one of the original Frank's box, kind of the original developer of this concept of ghost box, about over 20 years ago, and he developed prototypes that were called Frank's box. And the very early idea of this, very similar to the digital version, but very early idea, you have kind of exactly that, tuners in a box that you switch on, and they're just revolving along the frequencies, much like you would have a scanner on a radio, but this is kind of the old style radio. I love them. I think they're beguiling, absolutely beguiling. The thing I always say to my students is, if you're going to present evidence, ghost box evidence, the key thing you need to do is verify that what you're actually hearing, other people are hearing. And what I mean by that is, if you're presented with evidence in a ghost box, it's either a very, very clear word of which there's no doubt, absolutely no doubt, which makes it more evidential. If you've got the static and the word is not 100% clear, that's when you want to do some testing. Because as soon as you say, did you hear the word, or did you hear the name John, everybody thinks they heard the name John.
Right.
So I'm presented with ghost box recordings, and sometimes what I do with some of my students is I'll play the recording and I'll say, what can you hear? Write it down on a piece of paper. You get a room full of 20 students or so. If they all write down the same thing, you know that that's the actual word coming through.
Right.
Because there's a we talk about it in using the term pareidolia or matrixing, the fact that you can hear patterns in randomness. You can hear that word in randomness. So I love ghost boxes, but I always have to take a little bit of a skeptical perspective and say, if it's not clear, I don't want to know. I'll find out if everybody's hearing the same thing, because as soon as you tell me what it is, I can't stop hearing it. So that's the thing. When you get clear voices and clear things coming through, I think that's when it makes it, more interesting. Really interesting. I think we've got to be a little bit careful of some of the modern versions of ghost boxes that you find on smartphones and apps and that sort of thing. You've got to be a little bit careful, because there's always the worry that these devices are picking up on things that you are saying.
Right.
And people can test that, with smartphones and iPads and various things. All you need to do is have the same conversation over and over again about a product. A sofa bed or whatever it is. Do that, and you'll find that some of those adverts will start being picked up in some of the, so you need to be a little bit careful about some of these modern ones. But as a device for capturing evidence, why not? It's a particular approach. Who am I to say that there's only one approach to investigating the paranormal?
I thought you'd come down a lot more harsh on it than that.
I know. I kind of wanted you to be more harsh, because I usually don't like ghost boxes myself.
You usually don't like them.
I do not like them. They make no sense to me. The words that come up sometimes make no sense to me. Whatever. You're just playing with your phone. Go away is normally what I say. But Sean, you can share the story of something that happened when we were at Chambersburg a few weekends ago.
Sure.
We had some interesting things.
Yeah, the old jail in Chambersburg, Franklin County, Pennsylvania. And a word device gave the word medium out, which was ironic. So I said, who is the medium? And it sounded, I got to double check the recording completely from the video, but I thought it sounded a lot like Liz on the reply. And I was really shocked to get her.
Yeah,
the fact
it was
that
pretty funny
like
because
that.
I had just walked into the room at the honest to God, if I had walked in just outside of the room, I was next to the stairs and in the doorway, and it said medium just as I took a step in, and then they heard the Liz, and behind me another member came in, tripped, hit his head, and it said surprise.
Wow.
I am not kidding. I'm sure this exists on video. It was really that order.
Wow.
It could be purely
Perfect.
coincidental,
Yeah.
but it still was interesting no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
But evidence or not, it was very interesting.
But also what you could do is take the recording of where you think it said Liz.
Yeah.
And do what I said is, you call it blind testing. Give that recording to lots of other people or play it to people and just say, what do you think's being said here?
Right.
And that's a good way to test
What
it.
do you think's being said here? And if the majority of people say Liz, there you go. There's your evidence. Otherwise, you're going down the road of what Liz is saying. Exactly that. It's like, oh, come on, I can't really hear what's being said there. It's all a mess.
And they are tough to tell what's being said. Let's face it.
Yeah.
That's reality.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think upstairs too, when we were on the women's floor, and there was something with the word leaven, and I heard 11, and the other girl said it says leaven. I don't know. It's not my thing.
But the other thing is, I'm very jealous of you, of course, investigating a location in Chambersburg. I have family in Chambersburg, of all places. Of all
That's
places.
amazing.
Just down the road from Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And in Chambersburg, and you were investigating a location there. Amazing. So I'm very, very jealous that you were there.
That's definitely a place we're going to go back to. Hey, you know what? If you're ever around, let me know. I'd be glad if you're coming in advance. I'll set up that prison in advance.
Definitely. I'll hold you to that.
Please do. I would love to investigate with you. Definitely love to. I don't know. Yeah, I can't put it into words right, but I definitely love to. Let's put it that way.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'll definitely keep you posted.
Yeah, please do. Let me know if you're coming to Pennsylvania or anywhere near Pennsylvania. We'll set something up.
Definitely. Anywhere on the East Coast, in fact.
That would work. We didn't get a chance to really get. Oh wait 1 second. Let me check something out here quick. We have another question from Gary. If one is an empath, do they see things others don't?
The simple answer to that is no, by definition. In terms of when we talk about empaths, it's about feeling more than anything else. You know, it genuinely comes from the word empathy, but those that say that they are empaths like to distance themselves, or not distance themselves, but separate themselves from sensitive mediums that will say they're getting direct communication, or they're using clairvoyance or clairaudience or that sort of thing. It's more about clairsentience, sensing what's going on. And an empath, in my experience, empaths will talk more about the emotion that they're feeling in a particular location. So it's not about seeing. Thanks, Gary.
All right. And I know it's very late in England. We didn't get a chance to talk about your books. Do you want to talk about them a little bit a while?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to. Yeah, you've got to remember when you say it's quite late, it is 1 o'clock in the morning. Then again, we're ghost hunters, aren't we? So we're used to staying up at crazy hours.
Cool, awesome. Okay,
so yeah,
1 second here. We can bring up. So I have a picture here on your new book, Ghosted. One moment here. Go ahead and tell us about it if you don't mind.
Yeah, Ghosted. This is a book that I worked on over the main period of the pandemic. Basically, I had been working with what's called we call ourselves the Global Ghost Gang. It's a research group that now for about 4 or 5 years has been publishing studies, experimental work, various studies that we've done about loads of different aspects of hauntings and ghostly phenomena. And those are studies that are published in the main in journals, in scientific journals. And they have a particular way that they're written that makes them not necessarily the most accessible articles, accessible things to read. And so we decided as a gang that it would be a good idea to take everything that we'd researched in the last 5 years and make it accessible to ghost hunters and members of the public. So effectively what you've got in the book Ghosted is a summary of all of the research that we've conducted in the last 5 years about the psychology of hauntings, about the environment when it comes to hauntings, the environmental explanations for hauntings, all of that sort of stuff. And really it comes from the fact that about 20 years ago, there was a definitive book published in Parapsychology called Hauntings and Poltergeist, a Multidisciplinary Perspective, which took all of the research of the time, presented it. 20 years later, we wanted to see had the field moved on, effectively. And whilst the positive about the book is we're sharing all of the research that we've done, and it's kind of moved it on, the negative is that in 20 years, it feels like the field as a whole has not really moved on. You know, there are more ghost hunters than there ever have been. There's more interest in this stuff, it feels like, than there ever has been. But in terms of the scientific research, it doesn't feel like that has moved on at all. And the book is not just a guide with all of the studies that we've done. It's also a guide telling ghost hunters where they can get more information about infrasound, about EMF, about the psychology of what's going on. So it's kind of a useful resource. But it's a call out to ghost hunters and to parapsychologists to talk more. Because effectively, parapsychologists in their academic ivory towers will do their research, but like I said, they won't necessarily go out into the field. Whereas ghost hunters are doing the research. You're out there every week investigating locations, effectively gathering data. And the book is also then a call out to reframe it and say, you know what, you're citizen scientists, basically. And if anything, we should be talking more because we can learn from you and you can learn from us. And this book is about the stuff that we can share with you, and a call out to say, let's talk, let's get more data from you, and let's really move this field on and learn more about what ghosts actually are.
All right. And I like Jink's comment here earlier. This is early. We're fine. LOL.
Yeah, 1 o'clock, early in the morning, exactly.
Thank you, Jinx. And we have one more we'll share. Good night, Marla. Thank you for tuning in.
Good night, Marla.
All right. You want to talk about some of your other books? May I bring them up as well?
Yes, I don't mind. Absolutely.
Right. One moment here. If you don't mind here, there we go. I'm just a little bit slow at moving the sharing screen here. All right. Here we go. Oh, we'll get that here as we go along. Here's a guide to investigating the paranormal. And
oh, yeah. Yeah, this is a book I wrote with Yvette Fielding from Most Haunted. And really, we got together to write the book because, of course, Yvette has a particular way about her in terms of investigating and a particular perspective. So, you know, she's very much from a spiritualist perspective and very much believes in this sort of stuff. As an investigative method, people would argue that she runs and screams as an investigative method, but which is very different from very different from me, the calm, rational individual. So we just thought, well, let's, you know, get together and write this book. And effectively, for half the book, it's a resource again. It's highlights some of the best cases that exist. Borley Rectory is a good example, the most haunted house in England. It talks about, you know, gadgets and investigating, kind of giving my perspective, but giving some of Yvette's perspective. And then the latter half of the book actually covers 5 investigations that we did ourselves. Just effectively the two of us. We were supported by a team, but they're investigations that happened off camera, but we just did them for the book. And it was very much Yvette approaching the investigations in the way I wanted to, as in I was in control of the investigations, and we report them in the book. So yeah, very, very proud of what we achieved with that particular book. I think people were expecting a lot more of a Most Haunted sensational book, when in fact it is actually, you know, a really good coming together of our two perspectives. So very proud of that. That's
awesome. Also, we have probably more of a statement from Gary as well. In my quest with Bigfoot, because I didn't tell you this, but we are predominantly a Bigfoot channel.
Brilliant.
I found out that there are a slew of ghosts following Bigfoot, and something more scarier. Only had a glimpse of it. I'm thinking it is a rake.
Wow.
Or maybe, could he mean wraith?
Could mean wraith. Yeah.
I'm not sure what a rake is.
It's in interpretation, isn't it? In terms of what they are. You know, some people would say ghosts, some people say demons, some people say wraiths. You know, it's just interpretation, isn't it? But yeah, some nice insights there from Gary.
Thank you, Gary. All right. And one moment here, we'll bring up another one.
Could be here all night, you know.
I think we could go a lot longer here. I know we're already a little bit longer than I said we were going to go. Are you okay with that?
Yes, not a problem.
All right. Also have the Great Paranormal Clash.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and that's exactly...
There we go.
That's exactly what the book is, a clash. So there, my co-author is Billy Roberts, who's a medium. He's been a medium for decades. He's passed away now, passed away earlier this year. But Billy and I had many, many lunchtime conversations. He was based in Liverpool at the time. I was in Liverpool. Actually, he had a development and psychic centre on Penny Lane. So people that know the Beatles will know Penny Lane, genuine place in Liverpool. But Billy and I would have many lunches together where it would be a clash. Just genuinely just see things from totally different perspectives. And we said one day we should put this in a book. You know, each chapter should be a different aspect of the paranormal, and what people should read is they should read Ciarán says, boom, 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 boom. Billy says, boom, boom, and that's exactly what you get. And interestingly, in writing the book, we found that about 75% of stuff we disagreed with, and we gave our perspectives, but in a respectful way. And for the remaining 25%, we actually started to agree on various things. So it's it's a lovely book that I'm particularly proud of in terms of the work that we did, and it highlights the fact, I think, too often in the paranormal world, you'll find skeptics who are cynics, because skepticism is about being open-minded, but a true skeptic is open-minded. They don't shut their eyes or their ears to things. That's what a cynic does. And I think you'll find individuals that call themselves skeptics, and they won't talk to mediums, or they won't listen to what mediums say.
Right.
You know, but mediums have a perspective and have an insight and have an experience themselves that as a parapsychologist and ghost hunters we should be interested in, and we should be willing to hear in a respectful, non-judgmental way, and that's effectively what you get in that book.
That's awesome. All right. Whoops. All right. We also have the only other thing I have book wise is your In Spirit magazine issue. Was that just just 1 month of a magazine, or is that?
Yes, you picked a random issue of a magazine. I think if people picked up Paranormal magazine, In Spirit, if they picked up even the old Taps magazine back in the day, or Haunted magazine, there are loads of them. You'll find articles from me in many of these magazines, because I think it's quite useful to give the scientific perspective, you know, in some of these publications.
All right. And we have one more thing. It's a picture. Here we go. Whoops. Okay. Okay, actually, we have one more thing after this then, but a picture of you as part of the cast of
wow.
Let me see if we can.
That takes me back.
Yeah, it will be certainly a few years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll talk momentarily. I know it's running late, but about my interesting thing about the show, my favorite moment of the show. We talked about backstage. The late great Derek Pecora, and I mean it that way. And unfortunately, he is no longer with us. But he did something I'd love to do. He threw a lamp. He threw a lamp during the middle of a broadcast. That was just so awesome. I'd love to do that.
He was. I'll give him his due. He was a very brave individual with some of the stuff that happened, and yeah, he wouldn't. He always stuck by his guns in terms of his perspective and mediumship, and the fact that he was in contact. We had very, very different viewpoints. Very different viewpoints, and would clash many, many times, but he always stuck by his guns in terms of what he came up with and how he came up with it. But yeah, that was a classic moment, throwing the lamp, and there were many classic moments, many. But yes, thank you for that little trip down memory lane.
Hey, no problem. Also, Jenks has a comment here. What's the most fascinating or exciting thing you've learned in your career so far?
Wow. There are so many. There are absolutely so many. Pick up any of those books and you'll get an insight into some of the fascinating stuff, whether it's presentiment work, which is a form of precognition, whether it's some of the hauntings research. Yes, so many things. I guess aside from the fact that you guys have investigated a location in Chambersburg, which is probably one of the most exciting things I've heard this year, thinking that there are relatives sitting in Chambersburg that might even be listening in on this, going, "Oh, we wish Ciarán had been there." I guess one of the most exciting things was actually knowing that I was going to be having access to Hampton Court Palace for 2 weeks. That was for me a dream location. It's like if somebody said to me, on my bucket list is Alcatraz, and I've never been to Alcatraz, but if somebody said to me, you can live in Alcatraz for 2 weeks, it's that same sort of thing. Your ultimate location, you have free reign to be there for 2 weeks and to live there. That's just, yeah, Ghost Hunter's wet dream.
Right.
Oh, definitely. And Jenks has a comment for me. Don't be so sure Derek is no longer with us.
Exactly.
And Jenks is absolutely correct. I kind of assumed
100%.
Could not be with us. And then we have a little bit of an unusual comment. I don't want absolutely nothing to do with ghosts because you don't know what they're up to.
And we don't. That's very true. Yes.
Absolutely. All right. And then we have one more little thing here. And then, oops, there we go. And it's just how to get how people can follow you. There we go. And we'll change the banner at the bottom here a little bit. All right.
Yeah, this is a Linktree page for people that know Linktree. It's basically, think of the Linktree as one word, but there's a dot between TR and E. So linktr.ee is Linktree. And there, basically, that's a free site. You go there, has links to all of my social media accounts, but also you'll see that list there. It has access to information about my book. It has my work at Buckinghamshire New University, all the courses that I run there. It's got a link to ResearchGate where I put all of my research as well. So loads and loads of stuff there. So I encourage people to check that out if you're interested in anything I've talked about this evening.
Fantastic.
All right. And David says, time for me to get some sleep. Excellent chat, guys. Thanks, Ciarán. It's always a pleasure to hear your perspective.
Good night, David.
And thank you for tuning in, David, and participating in the chat. And that also goes for everyone else as well. All right. We are going to... of course, obviously now we are really about out of time. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Ciarán O'Keeffe. Do you have any upcoming appearances anywhere?
Oh, well, Unexplained Caught on Camera is going to be on TV starting tomorrow. Unexplained Caught on Camera. So it'll be on, I think, Really TV, which is a Sky channel in the UK, but it'll be on Discovery Plus as well, which I think US.
Definitely, that's definitely a US
Discovery
on
Plus.
the US, yeah.
Yeah, so Unexplained Caught on Camera, check that out. You will find there that I don't mince my words. You'll be pleased to hear, Liz, there are moments there where I'm a little bit more hardcore than I've been this evening. So
All right.
You'll love that.
That's what I like about you.
That's what I was expecting in the scientist.
Exactly. And a little scoop for you guys, the Battersea Poltergeist was the podcast we did that was hugely successful at the time, kind of #1 across various territories across the world. We are recording a #2 to that. So it's the same thing. It'll be a case. It won't be Battersea, but it'll be exactly the same approach that we took before. And we'll be recording that in the next few weeks. So look out for that kind of later on in the year.
Excellent. Yep. I can't wait to see that.
Same here. We certainly will. Also, his books are available on Amazon and include Ghost Hunters, A Guide to Investigating the Paranormal, In Search of the Supernatural, The Great Paranormal Clash. Oh, well, we'll just continue. And Science and Seance, a discussion between a parapsychologist and a clairvoyant. He also is in the April 2014 episode of In Spirit magazine. His new book is Ghosted, just came out, exploring the haunting reality of paranormal encounters. It's available through McFarlane Books. And the link has been shown at the bottom here at various times. maybe not right now, but mcfarlandbooks.com/product/ghosted. Here, one moment, we'll get that across there for the end. There we go. Now you can get the see the link to Ghosted in order to Ghosted. Scrolling across the bottom. We'll be taking our next episode off, and our next episode will be September 29th. I do not yet have a guest for that date. If you like the broadcast, consider helping us out by liking and sharing. Thank everyone for tuning in. Also, those who participated in chat, thank you. We had a great chat participation, a number of questions, great questions. Thank you. Also, watching on Facebook, giving us thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing on YouTube. If you watch us far, well, don't forget to also hit the bell so you can be notified of future broadcasts. Thank you. We appreciate all of you. Liz, do you have anything to add?
Thank you so much, Ciarán. It was lovely to meet you, and I hope we get to see you again. I'm looking so forward to, you're seeing your other works here.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Sean, and to everybody that listened, but specifically to the two of you. It's been lovely having a chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you again, either in another show and coming back on, which I'd love to do, but also, like you said, anytime I'm stateside, I'll drop you a line and let's do an investigation together.
Oh, that'd be freaking awesome. I would love that. Yes, thank you. Do you have anything else to add for anyone else, Ciarán, as well? For the
Not at all. No, I'm just very grateful. Some fascinating, insightful questions from the listeners, which has been absolutely amazing, and some brilliant questions from yourselves. And you've covered so much stuff as well. And there is so much more to discuss as well. But yeah, I'm just very, very grateful for the time to chat to you and to chat to others. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. If you can, please hold on as we go out here for backstage. Again, also, we return September 29th will be our next episode. All right. Oh, 1 second here. We have one more comment from Jenks. Thank you. She thanks us all. Thank you for tuning in, Jenks, as well. And she says, night, David. All right. And one moment here, and we are going to work our way out of here.
You've been watching Paranormal Files Into the Darkness, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARC Universal Today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC. Relentless.